Welcome back to another episode of the Western Blend podcast. And this week I have Jared Luhman on the podcast. He's a farmer and rancher from Minnesota, and he's also the host of the Ranching Returns podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Isaac. I'm honored to be on, and it's fun to be on this side of the podcast too. So I was telling my wife before, I was like, this will be nice to not have to be my responsibility to figure out what to ask next and how to keep the conversation flowing and stuff. It's fun to just hop on and have a conversation. So.
Yeah, that's kind of funny you say that. I had Willie Wardle on the last one, and if you've listened to the Registered Ranching podcast with Tucker Brown.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Willie was, I don't know, he was kind of co-host / he ran the actual podcast equipment and stuff.
Sure.
And he kind of said the same thing. He's like, yeah, it was nice to not be trying to keep track of where everything was going. And
right.
But
yeah, little less pressure for me. It doesn't help you at all, but for me anyway.
Yeah. But do you want to get into your background, where you grew up, and how you got started in farming and ranching, and when the podcast came about?
Sure, you bet. Yeah, so I never ventured far from home as some people do. I actually am living right now on what was my grandparents' house on the main home farm in Goodhue, Minnesota. So right in between Rochester and the Twin Cities, kind of along the Mississippi River. And this was the family farm I grew up in. It's definitely changed over the years. When I was my dad was growing up, it was kind of a conventional dairy, large conventional beef kind of operation, more higher input feedlot, stuff like that. And over the years, it's kind of transitioned and converted more. Well, in between there's been grazing dairy, sheep, organic crops, and kind of over the years have transitioned to where we are now, which is we still raise a little bit of row crops, organic and conventional row crops, but primarily cow-calf operation. We're a registered red and black Angus cow-calf operation, and we're cooperative producers for Faro Cattle Company. So we sell bulls through them. We're one of around 35 or so cooperative producers, and Faro Cattle Company markets, I want to say, around 1,200 bulls a year. They're like the 8th or 9th largest seed stock producer in the country. So we're really fortunate to be able to be a part of that organization, and it's just an awesome group of people doing some awesome things. But as far as myself, I grew up here. Mentioned I never went far from home. I went to college at the University of Minnesota, which was about an hour north, for agriculture. In the summers, I had summer internships, but I always got them close to home so I could keep working on the farm. During school, I would come back on the weekends and on Christmas break and help on the farm when needed and stuff. So I was always kind of involved. And when I graduated, I came back home full time on the ranch or farm here too. And that was in 2015. So it'll be 11 years this spring, which is crazy to think as well. So 11 years since I've been home. And yeah, in the last 11 years, I would say largely that we've kind of gone from we were fairly equally row crop and cattle. We've kind of been growing the cow herd over the last 11 years and reducing the row crop acres. And that's, I would say, both my dad and my passion is what we really enjoy. And now with the price of cattle and the price of crops, it looks like a pretty smart decision and stuff. But when I was coming back from college, I bought my first heifers in fall of 2014, right before everything came down. So it wasn't looking like the smartest decision maybe at that time, but it is what it is. So.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. I don't know. I'm just curious. Did people think you're kind of crazy I'm assuming you guys converted tillable acres into pasture? Yeah.
No, that's a good question. I always joke that, so the podcast before it was the Ranching Returns podcast was the Herd Quitter podcast. And I feel like my dad, the idea behind a herd quitter is kind of being that cow that goes against the herd and is thinking for herself and doing things differently. And my dad was kind of training me from that mindset, because in my area, everybody is either, feedlot beef cattle, conventional corn and soybeans, John Deere and Case tractors, Ford and Chevy pickup trucks. And we were the weird ones with a McCormick and a Ford tractor. We had a Toyota Tundra pickup truck. We were raising grass-fed, low-input, kind of moderate frame type beef and organic crops. And so I was, I feel like as long as I've grown up, we've been weird. And I think our neighbors are probably just used to it. So it maybe didn't surprise them that much when they see us seeding more tillable ground down to pasture. Whether they think it makes any sense or not, I don't know if it surprised them, but I think most people think it probably is a waste of good productive ground, because we really are in what I would consider to be pretty high quality productive soils here. It's rolling, fairly erosive, so that's part of why we like the pasture, but the soils and the dirt is really good for growing corn. It's, a lot of guys in the area are growing 250 bushel corn here, and so it's, definitely, I think people think it's a waste, but I obviously disagree. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm just curious from that. So was your dad already into kind of, I don't know, the counterculture side of farming?
Yeah.
And
yes.
And where'd that spark come from, or is that just the way he's wired?
No, I think it's a cool part of our family's story. I would say that I'm proud of my grandpa and my dad for doing it, because like I mentioned, my grandpa was a large scale, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, like when this was considered pretty big. He was farming over 1,000 acres of row crops. He had a couple hundred head kind of dairy farm, which is pretty large scale, kind of feedlot type, and big growthy Simmental feedlot beef cows, and also had a bunch of sheep and stuff too. So he was doing everything more kind of what at the time would be considered very progressive, very front of the pack, pushing the envelope in growth and production and everything and stuff. And they had a lot of foreign exchange students that would come and work on the farm to kind of help in the summer months, specifically when they did a ton of haying, small square hay bales and different things like that, just a lot of work. And we had a foreign exchange student from New Zealand who I was actually lucky enough to get on the podcast here 20, 30 years later, or whatever it is, to talk to him about his perspective. But he told my grandpa and my dad, he said, you guys essentially are dumb and doing everything wrong. You're 15 years behind us here in New Zealand, or over in New Zealand, just doing it all wrong. Just very matter of fact, blunt. That's kind of their culture, what I've learned too. And he just kind of told my dad and my grandpa, matter of fact, you guys are doing it wrong. And a lot of people would take offense to that, or say, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a kid, and we're one of the most progressive farmers around here. But my grandpa, to his credit, said to my dad, he said, John, you should go over to New Zealand and figure out what he's talking about and see if it's something we should be doing here. And so my dad, in between his sophomore and junior year at college, spent 8 or 9 months over in New Zealand working on a few different operations, and that's where I think he really got the passion for it was a grazing, dairy, and beef and sheep operations were the two different operations he worked on, and where he got a really good taste of and passion for the low input forage based model. Let the animals do the work for you, focus on producing grazing, just perennial forages, and let the animals do the work for you. So when my dad got home from college, actually he took off and about 3 miles down the road built a grazing dairy farm separate from my grandpa's farm. And then eventually when he took over, my grandpa was ready to retire, he took over the home farm and did that, kind of a grazing beef, focusing on forage, tried some sheep, and also the organic crops, which didn't really fit with the New Zealand model, but the organic crops, I would say, came out of his business mindset, where he knew that at the time, I think they were like 400, 500 acres, something like that, which is not a big farm. People would say you need, in our area, 1,000 acres per full-time family to make a living in commodity agriculture. And we had 500 acres with 2 families trying to make a living. So he knew he had to do something different. And the organic was kind of a premium. Rather than taking on a bunch of risk and debt and leverage and scaling up big, he focused on producing things at a premium and reducing costs. And so he got into selling seed stock with Farrow Cattle Company and raising organic crops. And that's kind of where that all came from, was just thinking differently, largely came from that New Zealander, I've always wondered what would happen, what our farm would look like if he hadn't done that, and we kept going down the trajectory that we had been. Maybe we'd be a big, large, successful dairy and conventional row cropper, and that wouldn't be all that either. Nothing wrong with that, but we certainly went a different path from that.
Yeah, I don't know, that's crazy that's how that played out.
Yeah.
But also really cool, like you said, that your grandpa had the thought to send your dad over there, and
right.
He came back and saw that it was a cool model and tested it at your guys' place.
Yeah, I agree. My grandpa's super, I guess, just humble enough to say that maybe I don't have it all right, even though, I mean, I've seen newspaper articles, they were highlighted for doing a lot of pretty awesome things. And yeah, he thought that there was still something to learn, and encouraged my dad to do that. And yeah, it's been obviously big change since then, but I credit him a lot to where we are today.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised that there isn't a little more, I don't know, trend towards converting some questionable tillable acres into pasture. Because I don't know, I did a short stint with NRCS, and I don't know, I feel like that was always my thought, because I was in Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, but so we have a ton of big dairies, and I understand for the dairy model that it might make more sense to haul feed to the cows, but at the same time,
I agree.
It's so input intensive for what they're getting.
Yeah, it's definitely a totally different mindset, and I can understand from one perspective too. Like, I guess we were lucky that we maybe weren't running that many row crop acres, so making the transition is easier. But when you get down that row crop mindset and you've got all of your infrastructure, you've got all this big overhead and equipment lined up for one production model, you want to run as many acres through that, overhead and equipment as you can. New combines now are $1 million+ and stuff. And so, the more acres you can run through it, the more you spread that cost over. But if you want to pull some poorer acres and put it into pasture, now you've got fewer acres to cover that. Plus you are adding different overheads required for a different business model with livestock, and kind of, that mindset of specialization. Once you specialize and you're set up for one enterprise, it's hard to venture away from that for several reasons: lack of knowledge and experience in a certain thing, not lack of infrastructure and equipment for a certain enterprise. And we all probably get guilty of getting stuck in our ways, and I'm probably as guilty as any of them. I actually want to get more and more towards specializing in the grazing model and getting out of row cropping altogether. And some people might say that's just as bad, I guess, or not that it's bad, but I have the same tendencies, I guess, to want to simplify rather than do too many different things and have a bunch of different equipment for a bunch of different enterprises, if that makes sense.
Yeah. To kind of come back around to something else you mentioned too, so you were able to come back to the family farm right after college.
Yeah, I was.
Was that from the different stuff that your dad and grandfather had been doing that there was an opening for you to come back? Because I know in a lot of cases, it's getting harder and harder for people to come back and there be a spot for them on the farm, or maybe they're just not interested, I guess. But
yeah, I would say, for being at the time, I don't remember what it was, 500-600 acre farm or something like that. We had a lot of stuff going on, and Dad kind of needed the help. And so I did come home, and it actually, timing worked out well because, unfortunately that fall, my grandpa had a stroke. And so after the fall I got home, he was unable to keep helping on the farm after that. And we just Dad needed the help. Organic row crops is very labor intensive. You spend a lot of time in the field going at a very slow speed, covering not very many acres per hour. So in the summer months was really busy. He kind of needed the help, which was fortunate in one way, that I was able to come back and stuff. some people, and I don't know what the right answer is. I've got young kids now, and so I don't know what the right answer is, but I hear a lot of people talk about the importance of getting away from the farm for a few years before you come right home. And, I came right home, so right or wrong, that's what I did. But, I don't know if that was the best decision ultimately or not.
Yeah. I do kind of like the idea of, like I said, I listened to Tucker's podcast, but it sounds like everyone that comes back to the R.A. Brown Ranch, they have a rule that you have to go away for like 4 years, which, that could be like your time at college or the military or something like that. And then when you come back to the ranch, if you want to come back, there either needs to be an opening that they want to fill, or you need to come back with some sort of business plan to add value to the ranch.
Yeah. I like that too, and I agree with that to a point. And I've always thought it'd be nice to add stuff. When I came home, I don't think there wasn't room. Like, I guess you kind of said there either needs to be a role or you need to add something, because there was a role here, and I was always like thinking I should try and add something to the farm, but there was no time. We were so busy as it was. There was no time to add anything different. But I do like that idea of bringing something back too, for a couple of reasons. One, just to add to the pie. I certainly don't like the idea of, if there's no role, bringing someone back just because they share a last name or something. I don't like that necessarily. But also, I think there's some value to having some ownership of an enterprise, some monetary ownership, but also just kind of mental ownership, like, this is mine, I built this. And I think there's value to that rather than just being like an employee farmhand, I guess, that has its disadvantages, I would say, for long-term kind of being invested in and having, mentally invested into the long-term operation, I guess.
Yeah. That makes sense. But when did the podcast thing start for you? Or where did that idea come from to start making a podcast?
Yeah. I don't remember when it started. I remember exactly where I learned about what podcasts were. I was at a wedding, and a friend was telling me how he listened to a podcast on the way to the wedding, and I was like, what's a podcast? And he told me and showed me the app Pocket Cast that he used, and I pulled it up, and I was like, this is incredible. Like, I spend so many hours a day in a tractor, out in the field, rolling up fences, doing whatever, that I just was either listening to the radio or not listening to anything. And I'm like, all those hours that I can start learning and stuff. And I just went all in. I was searching the podcasts, cattle, ranch, cows, everything, trying to find podcasts that I might be interested in. Just loved it. And I always thought it'd be cool to do one myself and ask questions that I wanted to ask and talk to people I wanted to talk to and stuff. And didn't really probably get serious until I took a job with the Sustainable Farming Association of Minnesota. I worked with them kind of in addition to working on the farm as kind of a soil health consultant and grazing consultant and stuff. And they had a podcast, and I had to do some interviews. And once I did that, I was like, okay, this isn't that hard. This isn't that stressful. I can at least carry a conversation for a few minutes. Maybe I can try this. And I did. That was February. It actually, as we're talking, I don't know when this will be released, it's been about exactly 5 years as we talk today that I started this thing. And the other part of the reason I wanted this, started too was, we're cooperative producers for Faro Cattle Company and raise bulls for them, and I wanted to be valuable to that program and kind of help share what we're doing and stuff too. And it's grown far beyond what I would have expected, and it's kind of turned into a side gig of its own that has been a blessing to our family and everything. So yeah, it started as the Herd Quitter podcast, and I don't remember if it was 2 years ago now or something that, long story short, it just chose to rebrand just to kind of clearly separate the podcast from Faro Cattle Company. We still work with them and everything, but just to kind of clear that up, we rebranded as the Ranching Returns podcast. And yeah, I interview a farmer, rancher, primarily just grazing-based livestock producers, and release an episode every single Monday. I don't think I've missed a Monday yet in 5 years now. And so that's the goal, and hopefully I can say the same thing 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's extremely impressive that you've been that consistent for that long, because I'm just trying to do every other week, and it's proving to be harder than I thought that would be. So
Yeah. Well, and I know when I started, I talked to a few people who were doing podcasts, like Clay Connery. He was probably the Working Cows podcast. If folks aren't familiar with it, he was, when I said I was searching in the search bar, like cows, cattle, everything. The Working Cows podcast was one of the first ones I found, and I just loved it. It's one of my favorites, and he was so generous with his time and his experience and shared, and I talked to other people who were doing stuff too, and they all kind of said one of the most important things you can do is be consistent. Set a timeline for when you're going to release an episode and do it. And so that's what I've done. In my mind, it's equally as important as making sure the cows get fed. Now, obviously, it is more important that the cows get fed, but in my mind, I make sure it's that important so that it becomes the priority that it has to be to actually get done. And, so here we are 5 years later. And I think I remember when my first son was born, I was up in the hospital, like he had just been born. It was a few hours and it was the middle of the night, and I was up editing and uploading a podcast just to get it out so that I didn't miss my Monday. And I think twice I've messed up. I usually schedule it for Monday morning at 1 a.m. and I think I added a 0 and made it 10 a.m. or 1 p.m. or something. So I guess I've not been perfectly consistent. 2 times I got the wrong time, but that's all right.
Yeah. I think people will look past the
I hope so.
minor time difference.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully nobody's chewed me out for it yet. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, changing gears a little bit from that, I guess this is kind of one of those selfish questions that is more for me, but do you think there's still opportunity or any good opportunity for younger people to get into ranching?
Yeah, good question. And first of all, I agree with the selfish questions. That's like it's like part of the benefit of having the podcast is you get to ask the questions that matter to you. That's what I love about it anyway.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I'm actually putting together a presentation for a conference I'm going to be giving next week, and one of the slides is on beginning farmers and ranchers, and I kind of put together a list of all the people that I've talked to that are first generation ranchers, and many of them are young first generation ranchers, like 30 years old or younger, or in their mid 30s and stuff. So there are a ton of people still doing it, and it might not look exactly like it used to do it. I mean, a lot of these people I would say are creative, and maybe how they're getting into it or how they're marketing their livestock or different things. And I can get into some of those examples if you wanted me to, but it's absolutely possible. But like anything, I guess I really believe life is choices and trade-offs. And if you're going to choose to be a first generation farmer or rancher, it's possible, but it is going to require trading off potentially other things. It's, I don't even want to use the word sacrifice, because, you sacrifice something, because I think a lot of people that choose not to sacrifice to get the ranch are sacrificing the ranch. Everything's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I don't like that word, because I think they think it's negative. It's a bad thing to go after something, because everything is sacrificing something else, but definitely still possible.
Yeah, I kind of like the way you worded that, though. I saw something the other day that was talking along the lines of you should dive into everything's pain in some way, in life, and you should pick the pain that you can most tolerate and dive into that. So
right, I like that. Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of the same kind of idea that you're, I don't know, like the example I keep going to is the people who choose not to go down the first generation ranching path because they think it would be too much of a sacrifice. If their dream was to be a farmer or rancher, that's a pretty painful choice to not go down that. Pretty big sacrifice. So it is. It's choose your pain, choose your hard, choose what you value most and stuff, and go after it. And I don't know. Yeah, hopefully you look back 20 years later and think you made the right decision, I guess.
Yeah. If you wanted to get into some of the first generation ranchers that you've
Yeah,
talked to and kind of how they're getting creative to make it work, I think that'd be
sure.
cool to hear some of that.
Yeah, yeah. The one, I guess, is probably the more obvious option, and that a lot of people would do is find somebody who's retiring and doesn't have a family heir. I've talked to several people who are working into some sort of an operation like that. Um, that those people value how their land is managed. They want to see it managed well. They care more about helping someone get started than getting maximum dollar right away and selling it off on auction tomorrow and stuff. So I've talked to several people who've just found someone like that who doesn't even necessarily give them a big deal or a discount, but just give them the opportunity to take over and to work into it over time or something like that. That's a huge one. Another example that comes to mind is Ryan Cohn, and his was really cool because he went out and bought and built businesses. I think the first or the main, well, he had a couple gas stations over the years, and one he bought like a medical supply company or something, and he grew it significantly and then sold the business and turned that into a ranch. Took the cash and turned it into a large scale ranch in Nebraska or something. Like that one was awesome. A lot of people are just doing like finding kind of alternative land options, I guess you might say, instead of just going and buying a farm. They're custom grazing on leased land would be a way to get in with minimal effort, going out leasing somebody's pasture or undesirable land that they don't want and taking custom cattle or grazing under solar panels or something like that. Or talked to a few people who get access to some reclaimed mine lands. And stuff like that, just kind of creative ways of finding land that is other than just buying the neighbor's farm or something too. And for some people, it's been moving. I would say, a lot of people think there may not be opportunities, and it's true. There may not be the perfect opportunity within 3 miles of where you live right now. It might require moving a long ways away, maybe even states away and stuff. But if the dream is that important, then that might be an important one too. Trying to think of other examples as far as creative marketing. To just go out and buy commercial cows and try and get into selling just weaned calves in the fall and stuff like that. That might be tough. Although I've talked to a couple people who've done that. Maybe it's going to require building a direct marketing business or kind of getting into sell by marketing and focusing on raising whatever class of livestock has the highest value of gain and pays the most and stuff at a given time, like or raising sheep or something different. Just being willing to do something different, I guess, kind of like what I talked about with my dad. You can go the high risk, high leverage debt growth model of commodity agriculture, or you can get creative and start trying to do something different and produce things at a lower cost and sell them at a higher price and generate more revenue on a smaller acreage. That's definitely an option that some people have done too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I probably annoy a lot of my friends back home because I'll call them and just try to talk through it, because a lot of them are also, the dream would be to put together some ground somewhere and maybe not get huge. It might not even be a full-time income, but, run some cows for fun and supplemental income, I guess. I think all of us would like it to be profitable and not be the person that's just doing it just to do it. But I'm always like, well, if we could somehow get this place and then might be able to lease this, and who knows, there's the average age of a farmer is getting up there, and there's a lot of dairies out there that something's going to happen to, at least talking back home for me. So
absolutely. No, I think there will always be opportunities there, with things obviously getting more expensive. That's a challenge. And so I guess back to that pain and trade-off and sacrifice thing and stuff. If you want to drive a nice brand new truck and live in a nice big fancy car and go on vacations 3 times a year to wherever, Jamaica and different places and stuff, then, it may not be a reality, I guess, because it's expensive. But there's going to be opportunities. I mean, I was just talking to someone the other day who was saying how many dairies quit in Wisconsin where he's at in the last year and stuff, just in his county, I think. And, there's, yeah, those got to go somewhere sometime. So,
Yeah. From that, I guess, do you have any other like major resources that you think people should look into or you'd like to share or just, help shape your thought process around all this different stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question. Resources. Well, as I've mentioned, I'm a huge fan of podcasts, and I've got a list of probably 100 podcasts on my podcast app and stuff that I listen to regularly and whatnot. Working Cows is fantastic. I think podcasts just in general are awesome ones. I think one of the greatest things that people can do if they're trying to get started or something is to get involved in either your community or organizations that are in the industry that you want to be in. And so, in our area, there's Minnesota Soil Health Coalition, there's the Sustainable Farming Association, there's a lot of these organizations that have a ton of farmers. And as I've gotten involved in these, I've met several people who are that kind of person I talked about, who are nearing retirement or retirement age, trying to find somebody to take over their place. It's not been the right fit for me because they're, a couple counties over and I've kind of got a home base here already established and stuff. But like I've run into a surprising amount of them. So get involved in those places just for the networking and the people you might meet. But also obviously they're putting on good educational content too. You're going to learn a lot at those kinds of things. So do that as much as you can. But getting involved and just getting to know people. You never know when opportunities will be. I've been blown away. I've had some people email me opportunities like, hey, would you want to take over this ranch in Nebraska and stuff where we were retiring? And I'm like, I'm really interested, but I think I'm kind of tied down here and stuff. But, when you start getting out in front of people, you'd be surprised what comes around.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, it is.
To circle back a little bit, when did the focus on, maybe not focus, but I mean the podcast is called Ranching Returns now. So
yeah,
the like financial side of stuff, and not sure if I'm wording it right, but like the profitability side.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. I know you get into a little bit of that in some of the podcasts and different stuff people are doing, but
yeah. So where did that kind of, why did I want to get into that, or what was?
Yeah, I guess just like your awareness of that side and more so knowing your numbers and
right. Yeah. So I would say from my dad, again, I kind of learned the need to be profitable, especially when we're on a small operation and we don't have a ton of few thousand acres of paid for land to carry us through the tough times and stuff. Like we have to be focused on being profitable. That got further, I guess, ingrained in us as we started really digging into our own numbers, got involved in like we went to the Ranching for Profit school, which again, you mentioned resources. That's a great one. I forgot, surprised I missed that. That's like the number one resource mentioned in my podcast is the Ranching for Profit school. But the focus on getting the numbers right was really interesting to me, and having an understanding of like a basic understanding that seems like it should be common sense, but I'm not sure necessarily is, of understanding what true profitability is. And like they talk about like what is profitability. Sorry, I might be going down a rabbit trail here that you didn't want.
No, but it's fine.
They talk about like what is profitability and stuff like that. And it seems like obvious. I feel like a lot of people maybe lean towards cash flow. It's the money you have left at the end of the year and stuff like that. And the big mindset shift for me was understanding that profit, is how they define it, is money left after paying for fair market land rent. And so there's going to be several things here, but one, it's fair market land rent. And so that means if you own the land free and clear, your operating business should be paying a fair market land rent to the landowner. If that's you, if that's a neighbor, whoever, it should pay fair market. That also means if you have a mortgage and that mortgage is far over fair market, the operating business, when calculating profit, should only have to cover that fair land rent. And the rest of that, the mortgage is paid with profits afterwards. But as far as calculating profit for a business, you have to calculate fair land rent. The next thing would be fair labor, fair wages for labor. A lot of people might be doing the jobs of two people and pulling a $30,000 a year salary out of their operation or something like that. I would say that business, maybe it's cash flow positive and you're surviving, but that business is not profitable. So pay, even if it's you and you're working all this time, pay what it would cost to replace you. And the one that I think really changed my perspective on stuff was paying a fair return on any equity tied up in the business. And so if you have cows that are paid for, if you have tractors that are paid for, if you have a tractor that's 50% paid for, what the 50% of your equity, that's your cash, your equity, your resources tied up and held inside a business that should be generating a return. And the number they use is, use 10% as a starting point. If you want, you can use what you can get from a treasury bond, or you can use more, because you can get 10% fairly easy over time in the stock market without working anything. So why should you put money into your business and return less than 10%? That one was a big kind of mind shift for me, because when you look at most farm businesses, a lot of people have a ton of equity tied up in cattle and equipment and infrastructure and stuff, generating a very poor return on it. So when we started demanding a 10% return on all of our cash tied up in the business, and again, this is separate from land ownership is separate from the operating business. But when you have demand a return on that, like, it really starts, businesses you thought were profitable because you have cash flow, when you start really accounting for fair costs associated with the business at market rates, may or may not actually be that profitable. And it really got me intrigued in just digging into our numbers. Like, we used to own a baler and we made a lot of hay. We have organic row crops, and hay is an important rotation in an organic row crop system. And when we did the math, we realized we were like, our cost to make hay was like $160 a ton or something crazy like that, maybe 140 or something like that. I don't remember. And we were feeding that to beef cows that we could have bought. Right now we're buying $80 a ton hay. We were feeding this $160 a ton hay to beef cows, and that was also organic, certified organic dairy quality hay. We probably could have been selling for $300 a ton. And it was like, when you really start analyzing your enterprises and realizing how stupid we were producing this really high value, high quality crop and feeding it to cows that don't need it and stuff, well, it forces you to, when you really understand your business and your enterprise financials, it forces you to, say, do I really, am I willing to do this? Am I willing to throw away $140 a ton to feed it to cows that, or should I sell it and buy back twice the amount of hay cheaper, for the cows, or should we get out of the haying altogether? Because if we want to, if we're trying to feed cows, then, and that's kind of what we've done. We've reduced making hay and just run more cows. And, I don't know, it's been really interesting for me to, when you really look at your business with your eyes wide open and ignore the cash flow, because you can have enough cash flow, but look at the true financials of the business and stuff. That was an eye-opening thing for me that I've really enjoyed getting into with people. And I probably don't dive into it as much as I should on the podcast. It's kind of an uncomfortable conversation to say, so tell me, how much money do you make? Thing with some people and stuff. But I really enjoy that conversation, and with a lot of folks, either after the call or friends and stuff, I think being open and around finances can be beneficial, because you can learn from each other if it's, with the intent to learn and not to brag or show off. And I've got a lot of really good peers in my community around here that are kind of also trying to do grazing businesses, that we can bounce ideas off of each other and have conversations around enterprise profitability and production and things that we can learn from each other. And that's been fun.
Yeah, that was an awesome answer, considering I worded that question to you horribly.
No, I apologize if I didn't even answer the question, but yeah.
No, that was definitely along the lines of what I was trying to get at, but.
Yeah. Well, and to get into the podcast a little bit, if that's what you're asking, like I say, I don't really ask maybe that many specific like dollars and cents questions, but I try to have conversations around, in general, like, what are your enterprises? Why is that working well for you? Like, and a lot of these people are changing enterprises as they come to the same realizations we did, and we'll have that conversation. And And then the other kind of part about the Ranching Returns podcast is I wanted to address that there's more returns than just financial as well. There's lifestyle returns, and you can, improve your environment and your land and your soil resources and stuff too. And so those are other returns to good, well-managed ranches, I believe, that I try to discuss and stuff as well. There's a lot more to ranching than just profit, more returns from ranching than just profit, and stuff as well. So we talk about all those things, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the idea around like different conservation practices and giving back to the land resource, but also making sure it's still everything pencils. Because,
right. Yeah.
If it doesn't and it gets sold and paved over, that's the worst option. So
right. Yeah. I think that was a big. I used to hate, I don't want to say hate, that's strong, but like dislike the idea of this whole holistic management. I don't know if you've heard of that kind of term and that kind of community of the holistic management. Alan Savory.
Yeah.
There's whole courses on it. We went to a couple day workshop on it and stuff too. And I'm like, I want the profit, talk about profit. How do I make money? And that's important. And I really enjoy that. But the older I've gotten, the more I do of this, the more I also realize how important it is to have a balance between the three and not focus solely on any one. I've seen people that I would say focus too much on soil health at the detriment of their profit, and it just doesn't work. And people who, I've seen people that I guess you could say focus on their lifestyle is maybe a better way than saying they're lazy, but they don't get out and they do their job, and it's a disaster too. And then there's people who focus purely on profit and they work themselves to death and their family leaves them, and their land is no better off when they die and stuff too. And, so finding this true balance as I've gotten a family, as I've gotten older, I'd say I understand and agree with the importance. And I spend more time looking at how does any given decision impact all of these factors, not just profitability. Probably one of the biggest ones is, in general, we try not to do anything that's sending the land backwards and stuff. And so that's a fairly easy one to meet. But like I would say, one of the biggest ones I look at is I'd say we've worked real hard for the last 10 years. And now I'm really trying to look at like, how do decisions impact my life as I've got, 3 kids now and a wife. I want to spend more intentional time with them and stuff too. So, you can look at something that might be a great opportunity to be, add profitability, but if it's pulling me away from them and I'm working harder, sleeping less, stressing more, is that really progress if we've already kind of accomplished, if we have enough already, kind of a thing. So, yeah. Well,
I feel like that kind of leads into, and I had texted you about this, but you always ask those 4 what are your thoughts questions.
Right. Yeah.
Towards the end of your podcast. So I thought it'd be cool to go through those and have you answer. So
yeah.
What are your thoughts on debt and leverage?
Yeah. Yeah. So I wish I had started asking these 4 questions to everyone from the start, because these 4 questions are ones that I'm really interested in just hearing people's perspectives on, because they're all ones that I'm kind of challenging myself with today. So yeah, the first one, is what are my thoughts on debt and leverage? And I've listened to enough of these. I should have a really good answer. And I would say I probably still don't, but it's kind of, I would definitely say that it's a tool, and I guess how we've definitely used it to scale. And I'm not saying that you have to, but in agriculture, it's a fairly expensive, capital intensive business unless you go the kind of custom grazing on leased land route and stuff. Scaling is going to be, it could require some leverage and some debt. But honestly, almost all of the debt that we've had has actually been on real estate outside of farming. We've grown fairly slowly, which is within the business, which is because we're fortunate enough to have a family farm that we can buy shares into rather than having to go out and buy a farm and buy everything at once. So we've been able to do the farming thing without debt, but I really have appreciated the use of debt to scale and to grow. But I personally am fairly conservative, I would say, and I all of our debt, I guess, is on long-term fixed interest real estate type things that, you know, I like to know what my debt will be for the long term, rather than, you know, variable interest on operating notes where the inputs might go up and the profitability goes down next year, and, you know, I might lose my ability to get an operating note or something like that. I don't like that kind of use of debt. That's, to me, high stress, high risk debt. I prefer low interest, long-term fixed interest debt and stuff on solid real estate assets is what we've largely used it. And I would say, that being said, in time, I hope to reduce and eliminate debt from our businesses and stuff as well, and move to more of a cash position, which I think a lot of people think is impossible within agriculture, but I disagree with. If all you do is grow and grow and grow, then maybe not. But I do think it's possible if it's a goal of yours to get out of debt. I've talked to a bunch of people who have gotten out of debt in agriculture, and I think that's a pretty powerful position to be in when opportunities come along, and just a very safe and secure way to be in the long term, I guess, too. So
yeah, I think that's a pretty good perspective on it. I don't know. I've listened to a fair bit of Dave Ramsey stuff and kind of followed that for a little bit. And then I've also read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and a lot of that made sense to me too. So
yeah, those are the exact opposite ends of the spectrum. And the truth is, I think that a person can become wealthy, I guess, if that's the goal, in either path fairly easily. And you can invest in real estate or ranching or stock market or whatever. And if you do it consistently over a long enough period of time, and in a large enough way, like if you live far enough beneath your means that you can do this, I think that anyone can build wealth pretty much with or without debt. So there's no wrong answer. It's kind of, what are your goals? What are you wanting to do? And then, you know, using the tools and the path that makes the most sense based on what you're wanting to do.
Yeah. So I guess we can go on to the next question, which you might have kind of answered in a way, but thoughts on land ownership?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I would say my perspectives are kind of changing and stuff as time goes on as well. I don't personally actually own any land yet, and it's been a very big goal of mine. I've wanted to own land for the longest time, but another big goal of mine as well is, I would say, to get to some level of financial independence where I never plan to not work again, and don't like the word retirement, but at least be able to do what I want when I want and stuff. And the closer I get to that position, the more owning land, it becomes less of a goal, because it almost is contrary to it. Like, because land doesn't pay for itself usually. So as I build my cash flow in other ways to get closer to that financial independence, now the idea of purchasing land will set me back, I guess, in that way. So from that perspective, like, land ownership, which was always a huge goal of mine, is all of a sudden in the last year or so becoming a thing that's like, maybe that's not really, what is the goal? Is the goal to own land? If the goal is to own land, obviously do it. But is the goal more financial independence and freedom? Then it's not. So I guess I got to figure out for myself what the goal is with that. I would say over my lifetime, I do want to own land. The question is, when's the right time? And I guess, but I do. I think owning land is important. Having a base that is there, whether that no one can just leave, or that parents can't die and get sold off and you can't have anymore. Like, having something that your operating business can operate on in perpetuity is important. And my grandpa bought land in his lifetime. My dad bought land in his lifetime, and I would like to buy land and add it to the operation in my lifetime, so that every generation has a little bit more to operate with. But in my area specifically, a farm last fall sold for $16,250 an acre. So it's getting to the point where it seems like it's I don't know if it's going to be a reality or not. We'll see. But it's that land ownership one is a tough one.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it either, because I feel like that's everyone's goal, especially, I don't know, younger guys that are into the outdoors or agriculture or whatever.
Right.
Like, you want to have that piece that's yours, but that
Yeah.
that making it pencil thing is definitely difficult.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, I wish it was. I wish it was easier. Maybe this comes down to how bad do you want it, and what are you willing to sacrifice? Again, back to that trade-offs and sacrifice and pain thing. What are you willing to give up to have it? And everybody's got to decide that for themselves. And it's also, I feel like usually land ownership is a decision that largely benefits the next generation. Most people, I don't know if I bought land today, I'm 32. I don't know if in my lifetime, or at least in my productive working lifetime, if that land would produce enough to pay itself off. I don't, even if I pay it off with extra money, fine, but will that land in its lifetime generate enough revenue to pay itself off? I don't know if it will, at least not for a long time. So land ownership is a kind of a selfless, multi-generational investment. You're giving the next generation more to work to hopefully put them in a more competitive position, I guess, at that time and stuff too. And, I've got 3 young kids now, and the 2 that are, we've got one that's a month old, so he's not telling me yet what he likes farming, but the 2 older ones, they certainly seem to love the cows and love the farm. And so if I've got 2 kids that want to farm, then I should probably get on it, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next one, which I'm have an idea what your answer might be, but I am curious since you mentioned the real estate stuff, but thoughts on off-ranch investments.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is one that I didn't start right away, and I wish I had. I feel like I was waiting around for the farm. My goal when I came home from college was to buy land, and the opportunities weren't coming, and it didn't happen. And so I didn't. And eventually I was like, I got to get my cash out of just sitting in the bank and invest in something. And so we bought a rental property. And since then we've grown our rental property portfolio. And I really think that has been a great thing for our family. Like I kind of talked about the financial independence, that's been a big part of getting us closer to, having that income that we don't, we have that more freedom and stuff. And so I think that's important. And I kind of talked about wanting to bring home next generations, and typically everybody talks about to bring home the next generation, you got to expand the business, and that's an option. And if that option comes, we certainly will expand the business. But if it doesn't come, how else could I bring home next generations? If my operation isn't large enough to have my dad, myself, and 2 kids, I see off ranch investing as possibly a way to do that, where, if my dad and I have investments off the ranch that we don't need to pull a salary from the farm, and we can take a step back and let the salary income from the farm go to the next generation. That might be a way to bring home the family. We could not expand another acre or another cow and have the opportunity maybe to bring home another generation, because the older generation isn't pulling away that income from the farm to live off of, I guess. So that's kind of how I viewed it, is giving us flexibility until opportunities come up. So we're still making progress and getting closer to, if we've got another generation that wants to come in, that we're not drawing 100% of our income from the farm, because that wouldn't be possible for our farm to have 4 separate families trying to pull incomes from our farm at the scale that it is right now. It just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
So something's got to change. It's either got to grow or we got to have incomes from elsewhere. So, I think it's important. It is interesting kind of to that conversation of off-ranch investing. Again, I wish I had asked these to all of the people, but since I started asking the question, I would say almost all of the multi-generational or long-term, like people who've been ranching 30, 40 years, all of those people talk about off-ranch investing as a pro and good, and diversification being good. And almost all of the beginning farmers and ranchers, while they all maybe would say that it's good and that's a goal of theirs, almost all of them are all in on their business. And And that, I don't think it's because they think that owning other stuff is bad, but it's the necessity that they have to do in their stage of their ranching careers, I guess. And so that's been interesting to learn from people too, that if your goal is a first generation rancher,
Yeah.
For most people it's all in, it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, what are your thoughts on enough?
Yeah. Yeah. So this one is kind of again to that, when should I take my foot off the gas? Should we keep grinding? For many years when I came home from school, there was a point in time where I think I was working that full-time off the farm job for the Sustainable Farming Association and still working probably 30 plus hours a week on the farm, and had the podcast going, and my wife and I had a meat marketing business, and we were buying and fixing up rentals, and we were working a ton. And I think that was good for the time, and it was important, and we've gotten a lot further than we would have if we hadn't done that. But the kind of question I've been challenging myself is when is enough, and when should I stop that grind stage and get to more of a change that holistic perspective, I guess, focus more on the lifestyle side of things too. And I think there is a point that is enough. I don't know exactly what that, everyone's got to decide for themselves, I guess, what that dollar amount is or something too. But the other big realization, I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, that I'm in a Bible reading course, or a read the Bible in a year thing right now, and read the book of Ecclesiastes. And I don't know if you've ever read it, and it's totally fine if not, but that book for me was like, that one hit home. It's pretty much, I don't know how many chapters of this guy, I think it's Solomon, saying, all this life is meaningless. He went out and he built wealth and it was meaningless. He had all this stuff and it was meaningless. And it talks about whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. And then goes on to say that I thought was a really cool line, and I've just got it pulled up here. It says, moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, this is a gift of God. And I think that the gift of God that he's referencing is not the wealth and possessions, but the ability to enjoy them. And to me, that kind of speaks of just finding contentment wherever you're at, is going to be important. And so that's what I've really tried to focus and challenge myself on, is I guess finding contentment at every stage. If you find contentment, you always have enough. And as you get more, it doesn't matter. If you have less, it doesn't matter. Just be content with where you're at. And I guess another perspective, kind of leading into my faith, and I apologize if that's not something you want me to share too much, but I think too, when when you're a believer and you realize that we're all sinners deserving of nothing more than death and eternal hell, that when you have that true perspective and belief, then everything else you have in the world looks like just, man, I'm the luckiest guy alive because I deserve to be dead, not to be living this life, and and not to have hope of eternity either. So I guess that has been a big impactor in my life too. I guess of just recognizing that I'm a blessed, imperfect person who's blessed, and that when you got that perspective, what more could you want? I've got enough.
Yeah. No, I think that's an awesome answer to that question. Also, just, I don't know, the way you talked about some of that stuff, I just started reading this book called The 5 Types of Wealth by Sahil Bloom. I mean, nothing to do with agriculture or anything like that, but I don't know, it's just cool and thought-provoking on how he breaks down, and I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but it's like, there is the financial side, but then it's like relationships and like time freedom and
right.
Man, I'm blanking on them, but so far I've really enjoyed it, and it definitely makes you think of what you're prioritizing and why. And then he kind of breaks it down into like there's seasons where like, hey, this might be your focus, but don't let the other like pillars of wealth completely disappear. or you might not be able to come back around to them. So it's just kind of interesting read and cool perspective on stuff.
I wrote that down. I'll check that out for sure. Yeah. Sounds super interesting. Yeah. Hopefully it's on audio. I haven't been able to find the time to read a book in a long time.
Yeah. The audiobooks are definitely kind of helpful.
Right. Yeah. For me anyway.
Yeah. But I have one last one that I wrote down here to ask you.
Sure.
And it's just with all the different things you're doing and working on and working towards, what legacy do you hope to leave behind?
It's a good one. I haven't thought of. It's a good question. Well, it won't be a legacy here. I get my first thought is to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Get to heaven. That's an important one. But as far as on earth here, I hope that. I don't remember if I think it was Warren Buffett. I've been listening to a lot of his stuff lately and stuff too. He says that when you get to his age, the success is largely maybe kind of measured by does your family spend time with you because they want to? I guess still, and I hope that my kids and that we raise, my wife and I, with my wife in charge, I'm sure they will be great kids. She's wonderful, but that we raise good children who contribute to society, who share their faith and bring others to faith, and that I guess that they would be my legacy, far more than my farm or ranch here. And I guess if you want to get into that a little bit and stuff too, that I would hope that that through the podcast, and that I always welcome people to reach out to me and stuff too. And I have a lot of people call and email, and I try to help as much as I can, just that that hopefully people were able to learn, and that I was a way to, that my life was one of service and a benefit to others, and net positive to others, I guess. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, from my experience listening, I think you're doing that. So.
I appreciate that. Yep. I appreciate that. That was a good question. A tough one I haven't thought about at all. So.
Yeah. I kind of felt bad to just pop that one on you. I might need to to do better about letting people know some of the stuff I might ask, especially something deeper along those lines. But
no, that's good. It's all good. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I don't know that I have anything else, unless there's something you wish I asked or you wanted to share yet, or.
No, nothing comes to mind. I'm happy to come on if you forget or if you have anything else, but I appreciate the opportunity. Isaac, thanks so much for having me.
I just wanted to hop on here at the end and ask that if you took some value away from the episode and found something that you enjoyed from it, that you take the time to share it with somebody, because that's the best way to help this podcast grow, and hopefully I can keep putting good information out to new people. So if you took something from this podcast episode, share it with someone, give it a like, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.